I think we can make a start, actually. So, good evening, everyone. You're very welcome at this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the committee. To my right, I'm joined by fellow councillors, and it will be the five of us who will make the decisions on the matters in front of us this evening. We're also joined by officers, principally sitting on my left, and they will be presenting the reports, offering us advice, and the officer team this evening is led by Lisa Chung, who's the head of development management, and Lisa sitting on my immediate left. So if we can start, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies for absence.
There are none. Declarations of interest, anyone?
It's a matter of public record, but I just thought it important to declare at the beginning of the meeting with regards to the conditions on the agenda to do with Atlantic House. Their conditions relating to planning permission PP 2306-237. I think it's important to note that on a previous planning application for that site, PP 22-01567, I did object and speak at the committee meeting, raising a number of concerns which predominantly focused on the number of pupils proposed in the application and the design of the building, both of which were dealt with at that planning committee where that was determined. I've not spoken with anybody in relation to the subsequent planning permission 2306-237 or spoken to anybody about these conditions. My only interactions with anyone about this site have been positive and productive meetings with the applicant about the materials of the design of the building. So I consider myself to be completely of open mind and not predisposed in any way. But I think it's important to note my involvement in some of the site's history before the meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have no minutes that need to be signed, so I can move now to. It might be helpful if I indicate the order in which we're going to consider the cases in front of us. In a moment or two's time, we're going to start with the strategic team application relating to the Lancaster West estate. We will then consider railings at St Mary Abbott's Church. We will then take the various discharge of conditions applications for Atlantic House. We will start with the one for which we have speakers, which is the final number part, 02799. This is discharge of the condition relating to noise. We will then move on to the other discharge of condition applications, and we will take those in the order in which they are printed in the agenda packs, if that makes sense. We will then move to consider Fawcett Street, Hornton Street, Orpen House, Gazelle Lodge, application in Portobello Road, St Catherine's Mews, 65 Finborough Road, 140 Finborough Road, and finally we will conclude by considering an application on the Fulham Road. So I hope that's, and I apologise in advance if your interest is in something that's actually a long way down this agenda. Okay, so I think we can, that being said, I think we can make a start. So Alice Culver, you're going to introduce the strategic team application for Lancaster West Estate, aren't you? So when you're ready, please, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just while the presentation's loading on the screen, I'd just like to clarify that the site isn't within a conservation area. Members may note on the the first report page, there's a error where it says it's located within the Cornwall Conservation Area. The site isn't within a conservation area. Just to bring that to your attention before we start. Great, so the application site relates to 3 residential buildings forming part of the Lancaster West Estate. The 3 buildings interconnect and they're known as Hurstway Walk, Teston Walk and Barradon Walk. Members can see them identified by the red circle on the slide before you. Just some existing site photos of the external, part of the external of the building. This application is a retrofit scheme, so it seeks to install some new wall installation using a brick slip system with some areas of render. There's going to be refurbishment of the existing balconies and terraces with new windows. The scheme also looks to rationalise the waste management within the site as well, and provide some general improvements to the estate. And then lastly, this slide just shows an impression or a visual impression of what the proposed buildings will look like with the new brick slip system and render. There's been no speakers this evening, and the reason this application is being presented is that the council are the applicant. So that concludes my presentation, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this? No. Okay, that's good. This application is one of a series involving upgrades and changes to council-owned estate property, essentially, yes. Okay. Good. Well, colleagues, I think in that case, the recommendation in front of us is to grant permission, obviously with conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that is agreed. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now turn to the North Pack, I think Fiona Fiona, you're going to introduce this, aren't you? This is the railings at St Mary Abbott's, around part of St Mary Abbott's Church. So when you're ready, please, Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have an image to put up. I know we don't usually do presentations for non-speaker cases, but I think it would be helpful just to see the railings that we're talking about. So both planning permission and listed building consent are sought for this development. There's one change we were proposing to make as officers to edit condition 6, which would allow the removal of railings. At the moment it's just drafted as a pre-commencement condition, but after liaising with the tree officers, that would still achieve the same goal of protecting the trees, but just gives some flexibility in relation to that. So one edit to condition 6. And attention is also drawn to the addendum report that has been circulated to members. So officers are recommending approval for both the planning and listed building applications, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions relating to this application? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. So in that case, I think we can probably, if I'm interpreting this correctly, we can probably move to a vote. Now, of course, we've got the planning permission and there's also listed building consent. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission as set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that is agreed. And the recommendation for listed building consent is also to grant listed building consent. Can I see those in favour of granting that? So that is also agreed. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So can we now turn to the discharge of conditions for Thomas's School, starting off with the discharge of the noise condition. So Fiona, you're going to take us through this, I think, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We haven't presented a presentation for this application as it is a discharge of condition. So planning permission has already been granted for the change of use at Atlantic House for use by Thomas's School. What the first application in front of you, N077, seeks to deal with is a management plan, and it is our understanding that it's to deal with the worst excesses of noise that is available. So the full drafting of the condition is included in the report at paragraph 4.2. So that just shows the full wording about prior to occupation, a noise management plan must be provided. And it was the committee at the time who granted permission for the change of use that requested it came back to a planning committee for determination, and that is why it's with you this evening. Also draw members' attention to the back of the pack, which provides a full copy of that management plan. So at the appropriate time, if you have any questions, you can refer me to any part of that, and hopefully I'll be able to assist. So thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Now, we have registered speakers for this discharge of condition. Now, we've got Councillor Mackover, Queensgate Ward Councillor, and also a number of people who have registered to speak. I don't know how you'd like to do this. Sam, would you like to go first?
I thought I would probably just bring the discussion together at the end, so
Okay,
my
that's absolutely
residents would go
fine.
first.
So between all of you, you've got up to 7 minutes. We will then hear from the applicant, and then there will be an opportunity for members to ask questions of either party. So please, when you're ready, do go ahead. Who'd like to lead off? Michael.
Thank you very much. To introduce a school playground to a tranquil residential area is extremely controversial. It's a major challenge to manage the noise. Government advice is to avoid this, and as a result, there are very few examples of proposals, let alone noise management plans. National, London, and local plan policy identifies the applicant as the agent of change, and this puts the onus on him to limit the impact on the amenity of residents. If you like, it's a nuisance coming to you, and that has to be sorted. In particular, national policy requires tranquil areas to be protected. And to discharge this condition, you must, as specified in Condition 29, assess the proposal against CD9, living conditions, and GB8, which is noise. That means you should have reasonable enjoyment of the use of your building and garden, and you must you must avoid an unacceptable impact on the local residential amenity. In terms of today's decision, the onus now falls on you to ensure that residents' amenity is safeguarded. It's in everybody's interest to secure a fair and effective noise management plan, to secure an effective process, to protect residents' amenity, and whilst enabling the use of the space as a school playground. We must secure a better agreement than that is currently being offered by the school. So what do we want? Well, what we don't want is for you to agree the recommendation. Neither do we want you to refuse it. But what we suggest is that you defer a decision instructing the parties to improve the noise management plan, especially improving monitoring and a more collaborative approach to review. Looking at the process, we worked very closely with the school on all of these management plans, and you'll notice we're not objecting to the others. But unfortunately, the noise management plan was submitted by Thomas's before we could come to full agreement on this, particularly on how noise would be monitored and reviewed, and our continuing role in the process. The submitted plan only proposes to monitor complaints, not monitor noise. It contains no proposal for noise monitoring in the critical first term, where you can identify and take action if there are any problems. It doesn't envisage any continuing collaboration with residents, but I should tell you that Ben Thomas informally offered to install noise monitoring, which I think reflects agreement on the need for noise monitoring, but this should really be within the noise management plan. The officer's report, this demonstrates, I think, a lack of appreciation of the impact of the playground. All of it seems to be geared to support the recommendation. It talks about minimizing noise. Minimizing is actually reducing to the smallest possible amount. That's an impossible task. All you can do is reduce it. But the question then is, by how much? We haven't got any evidence to show that. There's constant reference to officers are satisfied, often without any evidence to justify it. The report manages a clear recommendation, but without much evidence or testing. If you think that was a problem, the Environmental Health Officer's report is a complete failure to understand the issue. This is not about meeting a standard. We just need to know what the noise level is and whether it's a nuisance. And we're not being offered that, and the Environmental Health Officer clearly doesn't understand it. Well, I'm going to ask Richard here to tell you it from the point of view of immediate neighbours.
Thank you for letting me speak. So I have lived at 12 Douro Place, which is directly behind the playground, for 25 years. When the proposal to move the two Thomases schools into Atlantic House came about, I was strongly supportive of the idea, and I still am. I genuinely believe that Kensington needs other things than just houses. I strongly support the proposal to move Thomases into Atlantic House. And funnily enough, I accepted that for a period of time, whilst construction took place, that my way of life would be impacted. It was inevitable. And I must admit, however, that I didn't reckon on the disruption that has blighted my life for the last 2 years. My garden has been unusable. And in order to work, I work about 50% of the time from my house, all my windows have to be shut. You can imagine what it was like in the recent heat wave. All of this I could tolerate, and did tolerate in fact, because I imagined that once the school was finished, the impact would be erased. I must tell you, this will not be the case with this plan that is being proposed. My research and other research indicates that the noise level of this playground will be akin to that of a live music venue or a nightclub. I finish by stating that if you approve this noise management plan, you will severely harm the way I live my life in a borough in which I've spent most of my life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now,
Peter Rogers
you've
next. He's
got about 30 seconds, a minute left.
noise
I
consultant.
don't know if you want to leave a little bit of time for Councillor Mackover. Do you want to say a sentence or two, Sarah, or how do you want to do this?
I can speak quickly, Chair, if
Yeah,
that's
of
okay.
course, yeah.
So I'm Peter Rogers. I'm an independent acoustic expert. I've been asked to consider this matter. The area is very quiet. It is relatively quiet, tranquil in a conservation area. This means that it needs protection. It never has had a playground. The playground is a new noise source to the area, and there is a serious risk of harm. Regular high maximums and the character of the sound itself is likely to cause an observable to significant impact. Windows closed will be necessary for speech intelligibility inside. Think of a noisy bar. The noise management plan is currently inadequate. No monitoring or detail is given. RBKC is in the position that it may well allow a statutory nuisance to occur, and your policies CU9 and GDA mean that must be avoided. My recommendation is that you take the existing ambient conditions and you allow a +3 over the top as an objective target. That can be monitored in real time,
Okay.
and a repeat survey should be done.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much indeed. If you can
Can I
turn
just
your
finish?
microphone off, sir. Okay, so Councillor Mackover, I think you could have a sentence or two. to
Okay.
conclude, 'cause we're
Just in
well
a
over
thank you.
time.
Just in a sentence. Look, sound monitoring has already been agreed permanently for the school's plant, machinery, and emissions from the building. It seems entirely logical that the largest likely cause of noise, which is from a school playground, should also be monitored. It's been discussed and hasn't been secured into the management plan. Councillors tonight can secure a better agreement by deferring, so the monitoring aspect can be secured into the plan.
Very good. Well, thank you all for speaking. So we now turn to the applicant team, and I think Mr. Thomas, you're actually going to speak as the principal speaker. Is that right, sir?
Yes, please, Councillor.
Okay. So when you're ready, do go ahead. You actually have, well, a bit over 8 minutes. In fact, we give equal time, obviously. So please, when you're ready, go ahead.
That's very kind, thank you. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Ben Thomas. I'm a principal of Thomas London Day Schools. Just to give you some context about us, we are a family-run group of schools educating more than 2,000 children aged 2 to 16 in 6 schools in central London. Thomas's was founded in 1971 when my mother, Joanna, who is here this evening, was between acting jobs. She started a play group in a local church hall to keep me quiet when I was 2 years old. 6 years later, my father, David, had left the Gurkha regiment and joined her to start a prep school. Together, they sold the family home, moved us into a 2-bedroom flat, took a 10-year lease on a building in Cadogan Gardens, and started a school with 11 children and 2 teachers. In 1981, they were able to purchase our current buildings in Cottesmore Gardens. And in fact, thanks to the casting vote of the chair of the planning committee at the time, they opened what became Thomas's Kensington. I was 11 years old, and we lived quite literally above the shop in Cottesmore Gardens. In 2002, we acquired Lady Eden's School in Victoria Road at the other end of the street, and the Eden's flat in the school became my parents' home. They have been long-standing members of the Victoria Road Area Residents Association. I won't go into our support of local businesses such as the coffee shops and art galleries which make this such a pleasant neighbourhood. Our weekly attendance at Christchurch and Eldon Road, our years of hosting the church bazaar, or our financial and fundraising support for Christchurch. But I inflict the family history upon you simply to illustrate that this is a profoundly personal journey, deeply important to me and my family, and for the last 44 years rooted in the borough and in the local community, 1 street away from the location of this application. The Thomas's team here will be glad to answer any detailed questions. My main aim is to assure you that whilst we understand our neighbours' concerns, particularly with respect to the sound of children playing, and I'm very grateful to Richard particularly for his generosity in the way that he supported the application initially. We remain as committed to working with and supporting the local community as we have been for almost half a century. I will also address the noise management plan in more detail. Both Victoria Road and Cottesmore Gardens were family homes converted into schools. Lytham House was a school from 1888 for more than 50 years, and the planning approvals that you granted in 2023 and 24 allows it to return to that use, and for Victoria Road and Cottesmore Gardens to become homes once again. With both applications approved, the change of use for Lytham House and Atlantic House has been formally and fully established, paving the way for their development into a vibrant, modern learning environment of which the neighbourhood can be proud, and which will serve our pupils, 80% of whom are resident in the borough, for years to come. Condition 29 requires a noise management plan setting out through prior engagement with the local community and the Council's environmental health team how the outdoor areas will be managed. The noise management plan reflects our continuing commitment to being a considerate and respectful neighbour. It sets out how we will minimise the impact of day-to-day school operations on the local community, particularly with regard to playground use, deliveries and building services. We have worked closely with local residents associations, especially VRARA, holding consultations, site visits, individual and regular meetings. We've established a residents' working group chaired by Matt Nichol, our COO, who's here on my left, to ensure ongoing dialogue even after the school opens. We have engaged with the Council's Environmental Health Officer through the pre-application process, and the written advice confirmed the acceptability of the plan. The noise management plan includes key measures such as limiting playground use. Specifically, the playground will be available for play for 40 minutes in the morning from 10:10 to 10:50 and for 90 minutes during lunchtime from 12:20 to 1:50 on weekdays only, at term time only. These timings have been set in direct response to the requests made by VRARA. The noise management plan sets out several key measures to minimise disturbance, including no ball games during break, an acoustic fence around the perimeter, and soft surface play areas to reduce sound. All music and PE activities will be managed to avoid any noise spill beyond the building, with soundproofing measures in place and with regular testing. Drop-off and pick-up will be safely managed on-site with the help of trained marshals, and our delivery and servicing management plan has been designed to reduce traffic disruption and noise, with a preference for electric vehicles and off-peak scheduling. We've established a clear and robust complaints procedure to ensure that local residents can easily raise concerns. Complaints related to noise or school operations can be submitted by email or through an online form on the school's website. All complaints will be logged and promptly investigated and followed up with appropriate action. To maintain transparency, a monthly summary of noise monitoring and complaints will be published on the school's website during the first year. After this, an independent noise audit will be carried out to ensure our compliance. A formal review process, including public consultation, will take place every 3 months during the first year of operation. Following this initial period, reviews will occur annually or more frequently if triggered by complaints or findings from earlier reviews. All staff will be trained in noise management as part of their induction, with refresher sessions each term. Training covers supervision, playground behaviour and adherence to our noise management plan, ensuring that staff are actively engaged in supporting our commitment to being a considerate neighbour. We are a family school and our ethos has remained constant. Our school rule is simply be kind. We are committed to acting with integrity, with consideration and accountability, and these principles will guide how we continue to engage with the local community as a respectful and responsible neighbour. We are proud to have educated generations of local children, proud of our past within this borough, and excited about the future. Thank you for your consideration and your time this evening. With our remaining minute, if I may just ask David True, who is our acoustic expert, to introduce himself. He's not going to speak, he just will identify himself so that you can ask him questions about noise if you wish to.
Good evening. Yes, my name is David True. I'm partner at Baker Dyke Allen Partners. I'm here to answer any technical queries with regards to noise.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If you can just turn your microphone off. So very good. So, colleagues, questions to either party. Gerard, do you want to go first, and then Kasim, and then Sonia?
Thank you very much. This is a question for the objectors, Mr. Barr. Mr. Barr, you mentioned towards the end of all these discussions that St Thomas had agreed for monitoring to be put into the plan. Could you just elaborate on that? And obviously, much of your argument was about the monitoring, much of the papers in the report is about the monitoring. So that, to me, is a key aspect of this. Can you just say how far the offer that St Thomas have made goes towards making you feel better about this?
The management plan has got several stages of so-called monitoring and review. We have always tried, particularly for the first term, to get detailed monitoring and frequent monitoring so that the snagging can take place quickly during the term. And that would require to have monitoring equipment on site. That is not in the management plan. Ben Thomas has said, well, can't you have it as codicil? We would like it within the plan, stating quite clearly and in more detail than this document. This document, when you actually strip it down, is quite skimpy. We want a better worked up plan, and we want more emphasis not only on the monitoring, but also the review process in which we would be actively involved. So at the moment, it sounds like stuff will be put on their website and a newsletter, which is not that is not actually involving us in the review process. And we want this to work. We're not trying to kill the school or the playground. What we're trying to do is have a good neighbour. Now, I'm not disrespecting Ben's sincerity here. It's just that we do want to have something that moves us forward rather than just in arrears hearing problems. Can I just ask, do you want to say that? Sorry?
Back to that, that's just useful for the moment. So there is an offer on the table, but you need more, is what you're saying.
Well, I think the answer is yes. What we want are improvements to noise monitoring, and most of what you heard about is they'll monitor complaints. That is not noise monitoring. That doesn't tell you what the decibels were, or what it was about, or when it happened. It's just people saying, I've just had enough of this, and I'm going to have to put in a complaint. What we want are the facts. And interesting, in discussion with Ben, he recognized that what we need is objective measures, not people's subjective reactions. And that will help doing the snagging in the first term, and if it's still needed, to carry on afterwards. So we think, I mean, he thought that was reasonable. I think it's reasonable. We'd like to have it built into the plan so that if we do have problems, we're covered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may call first names Michael and Richard. I understand you've both have agreed that you do not want to us to object to this school, and you in a way support, but at the same time you want the best agreement for both for the school and for the residents, and that's in a way puts us in a position where we have to try our best to get both in agreement. One thing that I would like to ask, you've obviously, Councillor Hargrave, I've asked you that question. Is there the 90 minutes has been spoken about during lunchtime? I would like to know, is it in the afternoon, like lunchtime, or is it in the morning, the 45 minutes has been mentioned? What specific timing that you will think is the most will impact the residents? And do you have any objections to those timing that has been mentioned?
We actually had to draw teeth to get a table together, agreed with the school, to actually populate the timetable. We didn't object to anything. We did object to some of the activities, but we didn't object to the periods because the mid-morning and lunch breaks are quite clearly things that they would like to use. There will be 2 year groups plus staff. Now, 2 year groups when the school's in full running is 120 children. It's quite a small playground. They've made the agreement that you won't have any ball games in that period, but it wouldn't fit in. And that also, which you didn't say, is any other team ball games will be either in the gym or off-site. And that will If that is the case, and I'm sure you can confirm that, that will deal with some of the problems that come from team games, such as bouncing balls, people with whistles and things like that, and shouting. So, and that wouldn't be during the break time, that would be at other times. So we don't have a problem as such, although 120 children is a lot. But it will be at least a known time when it's happening.
Can I just point out one very quick remark in response to that? As a local councillor, one of the difficulties is if residents write in and say there was a terrible noise, but there is no actual measurement to say when it happened. If there was a particular spike in noise, then rather than people feeling it, a measurement which feels like it's being offered, but it's just a matter of getting it secured into this, would help everybody, because it may be that there was a particular, excitable class, or a teacher was called away and some noise thing happened. If you can measure, then everyone can help address and train the school and residents how to work together. So I'm as a local councillor very encouraged of how many of these conditions have been very successfully cooperated and written up. So we're at a very small but very important detail, which is how do you make noise management plan work if you don't actually measure it? We're measuring all sorts of other noise. It's very common to measure noise. There's good equipment can do it, and I would think that that noise management consultants probably have an agreed methodology so that whatever is being recorded is fair. So all we're trying to do is to find a way that people can rely on something substantial being in the complaints, and so people can identify and solve the problem. That's what we want long term.
We understand. I think we all understand the point that's being made. Did you want to, and then Sonia? Yeah, Kasim, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, again. Applicants Ben and David, if I may call you first names. Well, we've heard from our residents the issue of the good thing. If I start with, they're not against the school and they want conditions, and they want to be good neighbors. But also, I actually haven't mentioned this to the objectives, but I actually live next to school, and I absolutely understand why they've mentioned what they've mentioned. And it's not about people who have retired to have time and to relax during the day, but actually we work from home, and that's an important point to mention. So the timing you've mentioned here during the break time and 90 minutes and 45 minutes, but also what I think is the most important for the residents would be, and I would like to hear from your answer, is not just to rely on complaint. When it reaches the complaint, that time, obviously, people will write their long complaints and they will not be happy about it. Is there a way you can negotiate, not negotiate, but you can work with the residents, both David and Ben, so that the residents can get involved? I won't say the monitoring of every 3 months, but generally to feel they're part of it, rather than just relying on complaint on a website.
Councillor, thank you very much indeed. I mean, yes, I think I'd say two things. One is that we have committed to a public consultation every 3 months in the first year, so that will be open to neighbours. And primarily this is about relationships, and I hope I established in what I said that we totally understand our obligations to be a responsible member of the local community. And we also understand the impact of a school playground where there wasn't one before. I have given a written proposal to Michael Bark and to Vrara, and that came out of a very respectful meeting that we had, which he raised with us, which commits to 2 sound monitoring devices, one above the reception outdoor area and one above the playground. The reason I didn't want it in the noise management plan is that there is a key difference between monitoring the sound of children and monitoring the sound of plant, and I'm just going to ask David True to speak to that in a second. Also, none of us really know whether that's going to be an effective way of monitoring. Ultimately, this is going to be about, as I say, relationships and open communication, and I hope I've demonstrated our willingness, not only tonight, but actually Matt Nichol has bent over backwards to make sure that we've consulted with our neighbours, which is why I'm very grateful for the respectful and graceful tone that we've heard this evening. But perhaps David True could just speak about this technical issue about sound monitoring the noise of children, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yes. The planning condition is with regards to noise management, and then there's been discussion with regards to objective and subjectivity. It's quite common to have noise management plans with procedures as to what the school need to be doing on a day-to-day basis to minimise the noise effect. So that's relatively standard, but quite common in my industry. Measurements of children playing, we've never come across that before. So in 27 years, we've never come across a measurement system for children playing. There is quite a lot of information that can be deemed from the complaints. So the complaints information, if it's working well, should include contextual information, not just there's a complaint about noise, there's a complaint, it's about this time. There's certain time restrictions on when the playgrounds could be used, so that information on the complaint about time will give feedback to the school as to whether they need to change any procedures. It may be days of week. It may be, for example, that there are complaints on a Friday, and the teaching staff are different on Friday, and that would then feed back through the 3-month and the annual process as to what needs to happen with regards to the training of the teachers. So there is quite a lot of useful information that can be obtained contextually about what is happening, the impact on the residents. But it's important that that contextual information is there in the complaint system. With regards to the noise monitoring, I'm not actually aware that there's a permanent system proposed for monitoring plant. There is a planning condition which required an assessment of mechanical plant noise. That's planning condition 25, which I think has been discharged. So my understanding is that there's not a permanent noise monitoring system for monitoring mechanical plant noise. And yes, yeah, that's my response. Yes. The other thing as well is there was a proposal that noise levels should be no higher than 3 decibels than existing ambient noise levels. There's no limits for children playing. There's no statutory limits or hard levels that can be used to monitor a system as well. So that's potentially an issue when you have a noise management plan that's based too much on objective data, is that people start to look too much at the numbers and not at the context of what is causing the complaints.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Sonia, I think you wanted to ask questions.
So I think a number of my questions have already been addressed by other councillors. I also wanted to understand a bit more about, it says here that the complaints process will be used to determine which activities are considered by local residents to result in excessive noise. So I think I have heard from you in terms of what sort of your reasoning behind the lack of an objective methodology. What about enforcement? I think there's been a lot of discussion of, you've got various reviews, internal, independent, every 3 months you'll have another, in the first year, another review. But there's I think there's a lot of goodwill, but very little in the way of enforcement or anything objective. So what actually happens in practice? Firstly, when a resident makes a complaint, but secondly, I think the issue is really, I think the issue is that if a few months in, it's just absolutely dreadful, the noise for local residents, what can residents actually do about it? And they may respond to your consultation, but are you able to explain to us what measures would actually be taken to reduce the noise, or whether you might reconsider how you stagger playtimes or how many children are out of the classroom at one time and so on? It's just sort of, there's not a lot of detail in terms of like a commitment to action in the case that it completely changes the sort of everyday lives of local residents.
Councillor, thank you very much. I think I'm back to saying this is about open communication and dialogue. We will need to understand the nature of the problem. Ultimately, I'm sure from our other schools, the noisiest times are break time. And break time, it's morning break and it's lunch break, and that's when children are outside. Normally, what they get very excited about is football, and there's a lot of shouting. We have already removed ball games from the playground. If it is persistently intolerable for our neighbours, then the only most effective measure will be to reduce the number of children outside. I mean, obviously, as a school, we would like to give children the most opportunity to play outside as possible, without screens, being outside with... In our other schools, we have construction toys, which are not... Children don't get terribly excited and shouty about those. They are relatively... It keeps them busy, but they're outside using their hands and being occupied. So I think it will be a case of exactly what we've set out in the plan, which is working with neighbours to understand, how bad it is, when it's bad, and therefore what we can do. Ultimately, I think the key answer to your question, I would say, is to reduce the number of children who are in the playground. I'd much rather not commit to that, because obviously we would like as many children to enjoy fresh air as possible.
And are you able to elaborate a little bit on this acoustic fence? Is this something that you have at your other schools, and how effective is it in minimizing the noise or reducing noise levels?
Yes, so there's an acoustic fence that's required by the planning condition, and it's around the perimeter of the playground. So that's a proprietary acoustic fence. It's basically heavier than normal fences to reduce the noise going through it. Acoustic fences are only really effective when it creates a visual screen between the receiver, where someone is listening, and where the children are playing. So if residents are in Juro Place and they're within the gardens, the screen will provide a visual barrier, and therefore it will work quite well as a noise mitigation measure. Whereas in the mansion flats, which overlook the playground, they will not benefit from that, because they'll have a direct line of sight. Similarly, for some of the residents in Juro Place at I can't remember if it's at second floor or at first floor, they'll have a direct line of sight to some of the playground, and the barrier effect will be minimized. So the height of an acoustic fence is a sort of compromise. Acoustically, you could have a 8-meter high fence, which would be lovely for acoustics, but it would be horrendous to look at, and it would block out the light for people's gardens. So in terms of a mitigation measure, it's a bit of a balance between something to minimize the noise and something that's not too unacceptable for other non-acoustic measures.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, to the applicant and to Mr. Thomas and Mr. True, I think to start off, it's a real credit to the school, I think, to see the engagement that's gone on with the community over the last few years, and the fact that all the conditions that are coming back, or were at that original planning committee, were asked to come back to committee. The fact that there's only one now that there's sort of a tussle over, I think is positive and a good development. And shows that the willingness and engagement of the school to, as you say, with the family history that you've got, to engage with the community. My question really is, we've seen, well, not too far from the site, there's been a commercial site that's been reopened, and they've had to employ someone full-time to deal with complaints, which I'm sure is something that you want to avoid and ideally don't want to have to deal with. And so I think obviously the ideal situation here is really a management plan that ends up where really you don't have any complaints at the end, because you've got a system in place that prevents the neighbours from having to complain. I guess then, Mr. True, you said that the +3 would be is too specific, but obviously from a planning and enforcement perspective, you need a sort of a rough number or guideline to go over. If you were to put a number at what you think would be too much noise, because obviously if you have a little girl that's pushed over and screams, you wouldn't expect neighbours to complain. At a short brief, you talk about context, a short brief, high-pitched or loud noise. What you'd get complaints over is sustained periods of very high noise. And so I guess, given what you've heard tonight from the residents who are keen to negotiate and engage and find some way to agree on this final condition, if you were to be, I guess we talk about negotiations probably being the wrong word, but if you were to put it at a number of what you thought would be acceptable, or what you would, if you were to be asking the committee to to not be setting that number and to set a different number, what level would you be looking at or think would be reasonable?
Yeah, in our original acoustic assessment that we did for the planning application, there's no standard noise limits that apply for children playing. There's noise guidance that's used for transportation sources such as road traffic and rail traffic. In our planning acoustic report, I think we gave a level of 65 decibels measured over, I think it was about half an hour, as to represent what would be the onset of a significant effect. So we've already given essentially an opinion as to what would be a guideline level for essentially acceptable levels of noise. But I still think it's important to get the context, because if noise levels were measured, there could still be things, so that we could measure noise levels. They could be, say, below that number. They could be 50 decibels, but the school could be doing more to reduce the noise. So it may be that there are children playing in areas of the playground they shouldn't do, and it's getting that contextual information as to what's causing the complaint, which would then feed back into the school to help manage and mitigate that.
Chairman, is it possible that you can listen to our noise expert too?
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, to the objectors. I guess my question is, having heard what you've heard from the applicants, Mr. Bach, you said you didn't want us to refuse this condition at the beginning, you preferred deferral, but what is your response to what you've heard today, and what would you like us, in terms of if there are conditions that we can set tonight or things we can add to the noise management plan to try and allay any fears you might have? To any of whoever wants to respond.
I respectfully disagree with my expert counterpart over there. Monitoring is entirely normal in terms of construction noise, entertainment venues, film studios, all sorts of activities in society, and it's a very useful way to give immediate real-time feedback, which can lead to immediate emails. So, for example, those that are in charge of the management can immediately start to learn quickly as to a positive feedback loop, so that residents don't have to retrospectively complain. This should be a proactive approach which is taken and is entirely reasonable to set a limit of +3, because if you consider what is there at the moment, it is relatively tranquil. So if we have an increase of +3, that means you will just perceive the difference. Now, if you're in that situation, then that's the trigger at which the school will know that they need to start doing something. It's not an absolute, you must close the school, the playground. It is do something. So what you then need is an action plan. All of this is entirely missing within the noise management plan. It is what I would suggest is needed, and it's very straightforward.
Thank you. I've got a question to the applicant, actually. There have been a number of emails, most of them quite recent. Am I right in saying that you accept that some sort of noise monitoring, certainly for the first term, is something ideally you wouldn't have, but you accept that it's something that might be necessary to satisfy neighbours, essentially? Am I interpreting the various documents correctly?
Yes, quite right. We've given that commitment to VRARA. As I've said, our preference is that wasn't written into the noise management plan. We think it would be a temporary measure as we all get used to this new environment. But yes, is a short answer, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for answering our questions and addressing the issues. So we now have the opportunity to ask officers questions. I'd like to go first, if I may. I think we've heard that the Local Residents Association and the school seem to have got to a position where they're actually quite close together. The latest proposal for monitoring, it's described as a codicil, which I'm not quite sure I think of a noise plan as anything to do with a codicil, but obviously I'm conscious in planning we can't add conditions to a condition. But would there be, if with colleagues, if we were minded to say some sort of this explicit monitoring of noise, certainly for the first term, was something that we did feel was important, that it would be feasible to adjust the noise plan so that this was indeed included in it. Now, would we be able to do that by saying the decision is deferred so that this can be added, something which presumably, because the parties appear to agree on it, could be done in a few days, and then it could be agreed under delegated authority. We would have to give that delegated authority. Would we be able to go down that route?
It's possible, but it does add a layer of risk, I would say. You'd have to be incredibly specific about what you wanted us to secure and subsequently what you're giving us delegated powers for. Because if it was something like we are deferring it because we think there should be additional monitoring, it's unlikely that we will get the perfect solution. There is also, we'd need that real clarity because you'll be effectively making the decision in the most part, because normally if there was a significant change to a management plan or something like this, we'd reconsult. But if it was very clear that that was your decision and you needed something else, I think that's the only real way, unless you disagree, Lisa. It'd just be, yeah, Lisa agrees, so something very, very clear.
Yeah. Well, I think what's my understanding, colleagues, what's been proposed is actually something is quite precise. I think small number of monitors, that will give some data, as I think we've discussed in our questions with the parties. And I think that is something that is really quite precise, or can be, to my mind. I don't know. Would anyone like to pursue that thought? Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Mr. Bullock's submission to us, he talks about if the council requires monitoring information. If we do passes, he wants that the council should require monitoring information and a review involving residents and the council after the first term and further terms. Would that enable that to happen? I mean, we're so close here. We are so close here. It does need a. I'm reluctant to defer for all the reasons we always discuss at council meetings, defer, but we're so close here. There is goodwill on both sides, I detect. We just need something extra to push it over the line. And if we can't, then we're going to have to defer it, in my mind, because we're so close.
I think that's your only solution to securing that particular thing. Environmental Health they actually agree that a subjective assessment is best. That's their recommendation. But if members this evening decided that monitoring equipment was essential, that's, I think, the only way to do it and secure it. The reason Environmental Health have said about being a subjective assessment being better is because they see decibel monitors or meters being more appropriate for something where you've got physical control over it, like sound systems or the basin or something like that, not playgrounds, which doesn't have a noise level, an empirical noise level for nuisance, and that's where the challenges come from.
But it's going to be a balance of the two, isn't it? A measuring and context.
I think Environmental Health, just because I've spoken to them at length about it, I've had discussions with Michael Bark, which have been really helpful just for us as officers to come to that conclusion. And I don't think there's a perfect solution here because the use has been accepted and established. What we're looking to do is deal with the worst excesses. And I think officers and environmental health officers come to the view that proactive intervention through policy, through staff, through training, and through managing the playgrounds with limiting the number is the best solution. But if members disagree, I think deferring is the only way you can do it.
I think, Kazim, if I... Sorry, I just pursue this. So, so what we're saying is essentially officers are entirely satisfied with what's in front of us. It discharges the conditions, and I suppose in context we would say, as has been said, you know, having noise monitoring of something like a school playground is, you know, doesn't normally happen. Having acoustic enclosures around parts of school playgrounds don't normally happen. But I think this is a slightly unusual circumstance, although this school clearly has operated very close by for a number of years. It is moving into it's been consolidated into a different building and near a slightly different group of local residents. So I mean, unless any of my colleagues feel strongly, I think I'm inclined to say, I think I do take on board, and actually Mr. Bark and some of his colleagues have been quite clear that they are not interested in some kind of, in effect, a sort of wrecking manoeuvre in which the condition is refused and therefore the school can't open. That they don't actually want that at all. So I'm inclined to say that we should pursue this. I take the officer point about we have to be precise about what it is that we want. Actually, can I just ask colleagues, can I just say that Councillor Hargreaves and myself, are we sort of going down the wrong track here in the sense that, in fact, colleagues, you feel we should just say, well, we've got this in front of us, it's satisfactory. You know, what are we talking about all of this for? Kazim, did you want to come in?
I think both of you are right on this front, and I think we've heard both from the objectors as well as the applicant, and the decision, the agreement is quite close, and we don't want timeline to be wasted here, both for the residents as well as for the school. And I think we're getting there, and yes, it put us in a difficult position in a way to make a decision on this, but I think it's quite close. And if we can, rather than deferring the decision, if we can get the officers' support on this and to help us to frame in a way that can work with residents' objecting as well as the school, I think we can make the decision this evening rather than deferral. And again, it comes back to the officers helping us. And of course, the school mentioned 3 months, the first term, we can actually get to the solution. And if we get the residents on board, and one of the examples that has been mentioned is when children without this morning time or lunch time, and sometimes they come up with dates or the times that creates an issue for the residents. And I think that should be monitored, and that should be giving residents the benefit of knowing this time, on the specific time, lunchtime, is the school time, do what you have to do, the break time that is, and accept it. But other times where residents will be resting or working, I think that should be a decision. So all in all, I think officers' support will be required, and we can make a decision tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're showing great wisdom in your suggestion of how to go forward. I think absolutely. I think the main thing is to be clear, because as Mrs. Ray has said, you know, officers are happy with it. So I think we need to be clear that what we want to be included in that. But I just think we don't want to cause any problems to the school in terms of being able to open. But if we can, with being so close to actually having an agreement, if we can allow this to be almost taken offline, and so those discussions to continue for decisions to become, I think that's very much the right suggestion and right way to proceed.
Yes, I agree with what's been discussed. I think as long as it can be done swiftly. I'm not sure how long this usually takes. And also, obviously, we can't. It's not a condition. It's sort of deferring and delegating. How long are officers able to tell us how quickly this can be dealt with?
Well, I was going to suggest to officers that we defer, having made it absolutely clear why we're deferring and what we're expecting the officers to do, and obviously we have to operate in good faith, that the officers would then carry out our instruction, and then, in fact, the condition could be discharged under delegated authority. Now, that would mean it could happen very quickly. Now,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Chairman. With your permission, I'd just like to suggest that in your addendum reports, you have a letter from Ben Thomas that's got a big red draft across it. And my suggestion, based on the conversations and your conclusions just reached, is that you defer to get the 2 paragraphs starting I have and ending in standard exists redrafted and inserted into the noise management plan, which secures that monitoring. And then that, once received, can be delegated to approved by officers with no further consultation. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. There have been an awful lot of emails flying around about this, but if you think that's the best mechanism to do this, and it can be done quickly, then I think, colleagues, taken in the round, do we find that acceptable? We're inclined to support that. Charles? Yeah. Good.
Can I say what we would accept?
No, sorry, Michael. You've had your chance to ask questions.
Sorry, this is not an objection.
Yeah.
This is
No,
just
I'm sorry.
We're prepared to work now to do it.
Yeah. Well, we've emphasised that we expect this to happen rapidly. Sorry, you can't interrupt further. Either party, you're not allowed to.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to be more precise, I mean, we're looking at this letter dated the 23rd of May 2024. Now, where it starts, I have provided below a short summary of the parameters. I think it sounds like we're looking at these 4 bullet points, but not the paragraph that starts additionally and ends with such standard exists, because that's talking about it not forming part of the noise management plan, but being on a voluntary basis. So I think what I feel that you are looking for is the 4 bullet points, the first one being 2 monitors will be installed. The wording on a voluntary basis should be taken out because it's going to be part of the noise management plan. And then the second one, the monitors will be in operation. The third one, the objectives are to whatever. And then the fourth, the neighbours will be entitled to, and finish there. So if those 4 bullet points are incorporated, do you think that covers it all? Sorry? Sorry? For the first term only, yes. Yes. In the second bullet point, it specifically says it would be for the first term only, September to December.
My only comment very quickly, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that obviously the first term is autumn-winter, and I'd be slightly more comfortable if it could be for a year, because that at least covers the summer, and that gives you a full, if that's...
I think it's important we don't.
But Mr. Chairman, we do get a full cycle. If we do it for a year, it's a full cycle of the whole activities of the school.
Is there a planning reason why we couldn't do that?
The only concern I have is that we have no specific threshold then. So what we don't want is to have this expectation that the noise monitoring identifies a certain level and there's a level to say that it's acceptable. So I think even if you did conclude that a year was essential, I think it's important to also say that there won't be a specific noise threshold to be held to, because there will be the odd extreme where there is one child screaming at one time. So that's the enforceability point I'd be concerned about. So I think that also would need to be included.
That's relevant whether it's just a term or a whole year, surely.
Okay, look, I think we've discussed this at considerable length. So I think that officers have made it clear that, perhaps reluctantly, they're prepared to, that they're content that if we defer this, then the plan, through consultation with the applicant, and obviously the residents would have an input, they would have a say. Well, they've already had a number of says talking to the school, and that the deferral would mean that things could be amended as we have discussed, and then that could be then approved under delegated authority by officers, which would mean that it could happen very quickly, so that there was no impact on the school. Are we content with that? If I thought, we would do this for a year.
Yeah, so there's no planning reason why you can't ask for a year. I don't think that's unreasonable. It makes sense, I guess, with seasonal changes and the way in which the programme will be used will change over the year. Just to be clear, just because there was reference a moment ago to discussing with residents, the deferral would be to agree those 4 bullet points, removing on a voluntary basis from the first bullet point on the second bullet point to change it to the duration of the first year, September through to June, July. I'm sure we can confirm that with the school. And then, and that to be agreed with the applicant and then issue the decision. You aren't expecting us to consult with residents on that?
Not in any formal way, because it is for the applicant to discharge the condition. So you know, we're not going to have a further public consultation about this, but it does seem as though the parties have all had a considerable input, and I think it's, you know, we've managed to get to reach an acceptable position, to my mind. So, officer team, Ms. Chung. So I'm going to go to a decision now with my colleagues. I think I've got a good idea of where we might be going, and you're content with that. Okay, so colleagues, yes, thank you very much. So the recommendation is obviously to discharge the condition as set out in the report. So we need to do this by, I think, do we need a motion, first of all, to say, do we simply agree the condition as set out in the report?
No, you can just vote on the recommendation as it stands, and we've already discussed how.
Yes. So in other words,
how we're going to change the noise.
So we have to have a formal vote on the recommendation.
Yes,
or can we move immediately to discuss the deferral?
You can vote on the recommendation because we've already agreed that it's going to be approved subject to.
Okay.
This.
All right.
Councillor Husband, how does this protect residential amenity?
No, I'm sorry. You're not. You can't.
It's not.
I'm sorry. You can't speak at this point in the meeting. You've already had a chance to answer questions to my colleague.
But could you tell everybody here how it protects residential amenity?
No, it's deferring.
No, I'm sorry.
It's deferring.
You can't speak at this point.
Sorry, Chairman. I've changed my mind. Sorry. Right. I think the best way to do this is to have a deferral. So it does mean that someone has to second a deferral for, just someone propose and second a motion to defer for the NMP to be amended and then discharged by officers.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. So, colleagues, I would like to propose that the discharge of the condition be deferred so that the noise management plan can be amended in the ways that we have discussed at considerable length, so that there is monitoring for the first year of operation. The deferral will be such that the officers will liaise with the applicant and that we will delegate, as part of our decision now, we will delegate to officers the ability to approve under delegated authority. And that will have the important effect that the management plan can be amended, but without delaying the opening of the school. Does that make sense? Everyone happy about that? Okay, so...
Just need a seconder, that's all.
Yes, I was just coming to that, in fact.
Sorry.
Who would like to second that resolution? Who would like to second? Councillor Ali will second. So that resolution to defer, as I've just described, can I see those in favour of that resolution to defer as discussed? So that is agreed.
Okay. Is that unanimous? I couldn't see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you see any role for residents in this? Mr. Chairman, do you see any role for residents in this, or do we then fall back to be objectors?
Well,
because we
Michael,
will object if we can't be part of it.
Well, Michael, I think it's best if you perhaps go back and discuss with the school. We can't discuss. This is not a public meeting. In this, well, it's a meeting held in public of the planning committee. It's not a forum to have further discussions about this. But we would hope that the school would continue its engagement with local people, of course. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, everyone. So that concludes the discussion of that discharge of condition. If you have come really only interested in that, please, you're free to leave. We'll just pause for a moment or two before we move on to other matters, which in fact are the discharge of further conditions. Okay, so I think we can now go back to the North Pack, and I would suggest that, Mrs. Ray, should we go down the other conditions which do not have speakers in the order in which they're printed in the agenda? So we will start with details required. Well, the number 02757. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, again with this one, I don't have any material to show you on the screen. It's a delivery and servicing management plan which included waste, and the details have been included in the officer report just describing that. One letter commenting from Victoria Rose Residents Association, which was helpful, but that's all I have for members this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
colleagues, any questions relating to that? No. Okay, in that case, the recommendation is that we discharge the condition as set out in the officer's report. Can I see those in favour of discharging the condition? So that is agreed.
Thank you, Chairman. The next item is condition ending 2758, and that's for the travel plan, the details that were reserved. Again, the full details are in the pack. Happy to answer any questions on that one.
Are there any questions relating to that condition? No. Okay. Well, in that case, the recommendation is that we agree to discharge that condition. Can I see those in favour? So that is agreed. Thank you.
Next condition ending 2759 is for the traffic management plan, the details that were reserved. Again, no material to show you other than what's in the pack, given the nature. Officers are recommending approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions related to that? No. Okay, thank you. In that case, the recommendation is that we agree to discharge the condition. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Thank you.
Penultimate condition ending in 2800. This is for the details of cycle parking. All the details of the numbers, including scooter spaces, are included, and officers again are recommending to discharge this condition. Thanks.
Are there any questions relating to this condition? No. In that case, the recommendation is to grant. The condition is discharged. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed.
Thank you. The final condition on Atlantic House ending 2801 is for the transport details required relating to the car park management plan. Again, officers are recommending to discharge and grant this condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions relating to this? Okay, in that case, the recommendation is that we agree to discharge this condition. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? That is agreed. Thank you. Let's take just a couple of minutes break, if we may. Thank you. You're okay, sorry. Okay, I think we can resume. Thank you, everyone. So we now move on to the application at 6 Fawcett Street in the South Pack, and Emma Barrell is going to present that. So, Emma, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item number 9 relates to a planning application at 6 Fawcett Street. Just waiting for the presentation to load. Members' attention should firstly be drawn to the addendum pack, which has been circulated. As stated, planning permission is sought for a mansard roof extension. The dwelling house is located on the northwest side of Fawcett Street. It is a mid-terrace property within a small terrace group of 5 properties built in the late 19th century. The site is within the Boltons Conservation Area, and the property and terrace group are identified as positive buildings within the conservation area. Here we have an aerial view of the site. The red shows the site in the middle of the group. And here we have a couple of site photographs from the front elevation and also from the rear elevation. Here we have the existing plans on the left and the proposed elevations on the right. The proposal will be the first mansard roof in this terrace group that has been designed sympathetically as a traditional flat roof mansard. The street currently has existing mansard roof extensions, including a recently approved scheme at 12 to 18 Fawcett Street. Due to the changing nature of the street, the addition of another mansard roof extension is considered to continue to preserve the character and appearance and significance of the Boltons Conservation Area. The mansard roof has been designed well to sit within the existing roof structure and would not result in an adverse sense of enclosure to neighbouring properties. Limited overlooking and overshadowing would mean the proposal would safeguard the living conditions of surrounding residential properties. Conditions have been suggested relating to materials, and subject to these, the application is recommended to you for approval. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we've got an objector registered to speak. Are you with us, sir? Right. Apologies. Okay, so when you're ready, thanks for bearing with us while we had that quite long discussion earlier on. So when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes, please, to address us. So go ahead when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Hear me. Good evening. Good evening. My husband and I own and live at 8 Fawcett Street, which is in the block then in question. The children have moved away. We've been there since 2015. And I represent other objectors who couldn't be here tonight. Our objection to the additional story is because it is completely contrary to the policy CD12, and in particular parts 1, 3, and 9, as acknowledged by the report of the planning officer at paragraph 610 and 611. Our terrace is of the original style and intact. No other houses in our section of the terrace from Oakfield Street to Hollywood Road have had such changes. Furthermore, the wider bounded block in which our terrace sits, which is roughly about 23 properties in all, according to Google Maps, have had a fixed, unaltered roof line for over 100 years. The planning officer is seeking to rely on a change at number 18, which is an end of the terrace house on the other side of Oakfield Street. Although planning consent BP 2308435 was granted for, I quote, erection of a mansard roof across all terrace houses, along with reinstatement of front main cornice, unquote, we can find no consent for such a mansard to be constructed on a single house, such as number 18. The intention was always that if one house has to have mansard, then it should be for the whole terrace in order to maintain uniform line. Allowing a single mansard extension here would break that uniformity. That's exactly the kind of irreversible change conservation rules are meant to prevent. We request that the committee require adherence to policy CD12 of the local plan 2024 for the reasons listed at sections 1, 3, and 9 of that policy, and reject the application. Policy CD 12 of the Local Plan 2024 is the most recent consulted, adopted and up-to-date planning policy document, and yet the planning officer is seeking to overrule those policies which we consider not to be correct. This application goes against the Local Plan 2024, especially the policies CD 1, 2, 10 and 12 all stress the need to respect the architectural character and avoid piecemeal changes that damage uniformity. Even the Council's own Conservation and Design Officer admits, and I quote from the report, that a new addition to this unaltered terrace group would cause harm. So we would urge the Planning Committee to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, is the applicant or their agent with us? Yes, Mr. Power. So, are you're a neighbour, are you, or some? Okay, fine. So, in the same fashion, you have up to 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening. My wife and I own the top floor flat at 10 Fawcett Street, which is the property next door but one to number 6. Our property is on the same terrace as number 6, and the terrace contains a total of 5 properties. We're fully in support of the loft conversion plans for number 6 for the following reasons. Following advice from the planning officer, the submitted plans have been designed in a way to minimise any visual impact from the street level. The plans are in line with various approved mansard conversions in the immediate vicinity and on Fawcett Street, which are barely visible, if at all, from street level. The application for number 6 has incorporated all of the recommendations made by the planning officer, who, for the avoidance of doubt, has recommended the application for approval. The plans have been designed in a way that has a very minimal impact on both overshadowing and overlooking. In the case of overlooking, there'll be no additional overlooking compared to what the existing windows at second floor level already allow. One of the main reasons this application has been referred to the Planning Application Committee rather than being approved by the officer was due to at least one objection made by a property owner on the street who has already undertaken the same works. One of these objections was made by the owners of a property on the terrace opposite on 1 to 15 Fawcett Street, where the owner has undertaken their own loft conversion. As noted in the planning officer's report, 1 to 15 Fawcett Street contains properties both with and without mansard loft conversions. It would therefore seem unreasonable for this application not to be approved because of objections made by property owners on the street who have already undertaken works themselves. Number 18 Fawcett Street, which is located on the terrace adjacent to ours, has already undertaken the mansard loft conversion that was approved by the Planning Committee last year. These are identical works to the works proposed at number 6 and illustrate in real life that the works are barely visible from street level. This is particularly important as number 18 is the only property which has undertaken the works on the terrace so far, and the visual impact of the terrace is virtually non-existent at street level. As the proposed works at number 6 will follow the same design principles as number 18, it's hard to argue that the works to number 6 will have any significant visual impact to the terrace or the street in general. As I understand it, one of the most crucial elements of the planning decision process is whether or not the application is in keeping with the general character of properties in the vicinity. Given the amount of existing mansard loft conversions on Fawcett Street, it's also very hard to argue that the proposed works at number 6 would be at all out of character for the street or the area in general. It's also worth noting that the pitch of the mansard for number 6 is more set back than many of the existing mansards in the area and will be less visible than many other loft conversions. By approving the application at number 6, this would therefore set a precedent for any other future applications on the terrace or in the general area, which would be required to follow these very sensitive design principles. And lastly, given the lack of available land in the borough generally, the main way to add additional housing capacity is to adapt and extend the existing housing stock. Building upwards by way of a loft conversion is an environmentally sustainable and effective way of adding capacity to the borough, particularly when undertaken in a way that's sensitive to the building's historical character as proposed at number 6. In my view, the proposed plan should be fully supported by the committee, as they have been by the planning officer in charge of this application.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Can I just have a quick question? Are you my neighbour?
No, I'm
sorry, I hadn't realised.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Me and Casper have met.
I'm sorry. You can't cross-examine one another. I'm
sorry.
afraid. Colleagues, so our turn to ask questions of either party. Are there any questions anyone like to ask? No, there are none. Sonia.
So just to point out that I am, of course, sympathetic to the applicant and understand that there are other houses on the street that have mansards, but there is, I think, the southern terrace directly opposite, which you've mentioned. The entire block is essentially, the entire opposite side of the street, it looks to be the case that there are mansards, so it's quite uniform, that this sort of block. And then 12 to 18 is also almost that entire row of terraces would have a mansard. I think the difference with this is that it would just be one terrace. It's not exactly the same in terms of it.
1 to 15, which is the one
yes.
opposite, has both mansards and non-mansards.
What? Okay. So I suppose, obviously it's difficult to necessarily question you because you're not the, you haven't sort of designed it. But just to note that I do think it's a bit odd to have only one terrace in an entire block with a mansard that raises the height of that particular terrace.
I think perhaps Mr. Pye is not actually, of course, the applicant or the agent, but do you have a brief comment about that? Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the comment I made before, which is 18, which is basically the same terrace as ours. So number 12 to 18, but 18 has done the works, and it's just one building within that terrace. They've already done it. You probably can't see it on Google Maps because it doesn't show yet, but it is barely visible from street level, and number 6's application is very similar.
All right. Any other questions, anyone? No, there are none. Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you both for speaking. Can you turn your microphone off,
yes,
please?
Sorry.
Do you mind? Questions to officers. Who would like to go first? Roberta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, officers, because they're the neighbour who is supporting mentioned that number 18 has a mansard on its own. Is that just because my understanding is that that whole terrace should now be getting mansards? Is that because they haven't built the rest of them, or what's the situation there?
I believe there's reference in the officer report to an application in 2023 which related to 12 to 18 Fawcett Street. I can have a quick look at the proposal, but I'm not completely sure if that proposed a mansard to all 5 of them. It did. It did propose a mansard to all 5 of the properties, and that was approved in 2023.
Any other questions? I've got a question. I wasn't actually at the committee that considered, I think it's 12 to 18. It would strike me that the planning system can't compel people to build mansards. What it can, I think, if I'm understood right, it can say in this section of terrace, all the buildings could have a mansard roof, but obviously people would have to wish to do it themselves. They'd have to wish to implement a planning permission, wouldn't they? Have I got that right? Because I vaguely remember the address, although, as I say, I didn't sit on the committee that considered this.
Yeah, so just for context, I think it's important just to be clear, 12 to 18 Fawcett Street was recommended for refusal by officers. Some of the arguments that were presented was about isolated mansard extensions, and we do have policies, a very clear policy in respect of ensuring that where you do extend upward, and you only have isolated examples on terraces or in groups, that usually they would be resisted. The application was called into committee and it was approved by that committee. So the committee took a different view at that time that actually they would not be harmful. They are a group. Just having a quick look at the decision that then was issued, there is a mechanism that's been used historically. It's not always the best, is that normally where you've got a group, and if you're giving weight to every house extending in a particular way, you would normally look at something like a legal agreement to secure, so should one start building, the rest have to follow. The reason that can be quite difficult is that not everybody's in the same position to start building at the same time, and it can lead to quite a lot of conflict outside of the planning system. So this one doesn't have a legal agreement, so you could be in a position where 12 to 18, one or two of them or all of them could build, but not necessarily at the same time, but over a period of time. And I guess all it takes is one to start building within 3 years to bank that permission, and that permission remains extant.
And am I right in thinking that that committee decision is quite influential in the way that officers have approached this particular application?
I think officers, in relation to this application, acknowledge that this would be the only one in the group that is at the current time has proposed this. So officers have assessed this against the relevant policy, CD12. Officers have acknowledged a conflict with parts of policy CD12, but officers have said, when considered against the character and appearance of the wider area and that the design of the mansard would be sympathetic to the form and character of the terrace group, the additional story would be acceptable. We've also included conditions relating to materials as well, just to safeguard that visual impact.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, so we need to make a decision about this. What do we think? It's a difficult situation because we've heard a previous committee made a decision which tends to suggest that in this particular street, mansard extensions would be acceptable. On the other hand, you can argue this as it stands, this is rather by itself, and you could argue it's contrary to policy, as the objector has said. So it's a slightly odd situation which we don't normally come across. I'd just like to go down the table. What do people feel about this? How do you feel?
I mean, in one way, the mansards are a feature of our borough. This is quite a sympathetic design. The objectors quite rightly mentioned the bit about the conservation design officer, but she made 2 points. One, that it was, would cause harm, but then said it actually sets a precedent of the sort of design you might have there. So in a way, as you're trying to allude to, it's an unbalanced decision, this, isn't it? You know.
But you're inclined to go along with the recommendation?
I am, okay. Yes.
Anybody else like to expect? Roberto?
I'm afraid, just to make things difficult, I'm inclined to go the other way. My feeling is that, look, when it comes to the application for 18 to 12, I think actually that's probably the perfect way to do mansards if you want to get a whole set of houses to all build up. I think that's clearly done it the right way. I think, as Councillor Svedeniuk pointed out earlier, I think this on its own just, again, would look out of place. And given that is the policy we have, CD12, I'm inclined to give that more weight.
That's fine. Sonia or Kazim?
I agree with the comments made by Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Okay, all right. Kazim?
I understand, Chair, both comments from the objector as well as the supporter rather than the agent, dealing with housing issues in the borough and following the policies. I absolutely understand, but I'm also inclined to agree with the officers on this one.
Well, in that case, I think what we should do is we should take a vote on the recommendation and see where we go. So the recommendation is to grant, with obviously the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Those against? So the recommendation is agreed by 3 votes to 2. Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Can we now move on to consider the application at 70 Hornton Street? That's back to Fiona, isn't it? Fiona Ray.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just while we get the presentation up, if that's okay, thank you. Draw members' attention to the addendum report, and just we've also picked up that there's a duplicate condition on our recommendation. So condition 10 is the same as condition 4, so we'd delete that from our recommendation to you, and apologies for that. So turning to the slides, I think this image is really helpful, this aerial image of the street that shows number 70 within its context. And here you can see where they're proposing the part demolition of the rear extensions and outriggers and the erection of a new wraparound extension at lower ground with an infill above. And here is an existing rear elevation and a proposed rear elevation. So where officers talk about the rear kind of projection that comes out, it's limited to behind that closet wing at the lower level, which I'm just trying to show you on this existing plan. But it's proposed to go full width with that and then infill adjacent to that closet wing with some fenestration changes included as well. The section drawing shows this, so showing the infill and that it's limited to the depth of the main closet wing and then that projection beyond. And then the floor plans are helpful just to identify the extent of the footprint at lower ground floor, kind of outlined in blue on this left image, and then that infill extension above limited to that of the closet wing. So officers are recommending approval for the application. And after the speakers, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think we've got speakers for this case. Mr. Wheelhouse, thank you for waiting.
Good evening.
And bearing with
No
us.
problem.
So you've got up to 3 minutes. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm Mark Wheelhouse. I'm the owner of 72 Hornton Street, which is immediately to the north of number 70. My wife and I have lived at 72 for 18 years, most recently with our 2 daughters. The applicants don't live at 70. It's been rented out since before we arrived on the scene in 2007. Our objection to the application is limited to the proposed lower ground rear extension, and in particular its height. We believe this would have a material and negative effect on our living conditions, access for light and sunlight. These are very small enclosed patio gardens, and any reduction in sunlight in particular is significant. And our garden depends almost exclusively on access of sunlight over our boundary with number 70. The wall between our 2 properties at the moment is 2.2 metres high on our side of the wall. The roof of the current storeroom to the rear of 70 is flush with the top of that wall, and it's invisible from our garden. The roof of the extension, however, would be approximately 50 centimetres above the height of the existing wall, an increase of 20 to 25%, and the building would be along 40% of the length of the dividing wall between us. Our garden is only 5 metres wide and 4 metres deep or long. In context, the increase in height is particularly significant. The proposed extension is not, as stated by the applicant's Planning and Heritage Report, and I quote, almost the same height as the proposed extension. Nor is it correct that, quote, there is no effect on 72. Nor was the Planning Authority's pre-application advice report, which was based only on a photo and not on any physical inspection, accurate when it says, and I quote again, the proposed extensions appear not to have an impact on the living conditions of 70 in terms of daylight or sunlight, a sense of enclosure and privacy. Our own efforts to assess the effect on access of sunlight over 70 into our garden show that it would be significantly affected during summer, and even more so in the winter when the sun is lower in the sky. If the extension is to be permitted, its height ought to be reduced significantly, so that it is actually almost the same height as the existing extension. but it appears that no one's made any attempt to make any assessment on the effect on the Garden of 72. Pre-application, there was no effort on the part of the applicants to contact us or consult with us, despite that being expected by the local plan. That was unfortunate. The first we heard of the application was when we were notified of its existence. Nor apparently has there been any technical assessment of daylight and sunlight as envisaged by paragraphs 679 and 680 of the local plan, nor any on-site assessment by either the applicants or by the planning officers. That is until our application was lodged when the planning officer did visit our garden and told my wife that he could now see the problem that we were confronted with and agreed that sunlight would be affected. Yet paragraph 614 on page 90 of the report to this committee still states that the extension would be hidden and not project significantly above the current wall. In relation to a very small garden like ours, that statement is plainly wrong. We have no wish to be difficult and would have much preferred to have dealt with all of this before the application was made, and would have been very happy to discuss anything that would resolve the issue that we're confronted with.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Mr. Chan, you're the agent, yes? So please, you've got up to... Yeah. Just try and... Yeah, try...
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Sorry.
there. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
you've up to 3 minutes as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me today. 70 Hornsey Street is a three-storey terrace house with a lower ground floor built in the mid-19th century. It is located on the eastern side of Hornsey Street between Pitt Street, Camden and Grove, and lies within the Kensington Conservation Area. At the rear, there's a four-storey outrigger with a small later extension at the lower ground floor level. We initially engaged with the planning authority through pre-application advice in July 2024, and the feedback was that the overall scheme would be supported subject to some changes and submission of additional information. The changes were made and the information provided, and the planning application was submitted in February 2025. We have liaised with the council throughout, and where required have made amendments to the proposal and responded to planning comments. The applicant wishes to demolish the small extension and supporting walls to the outrigger at the lower ground floor and replace it with a new wraparound side and rear extension to the same depth as the removed extension. At the upper ground level, to the side of the outrigger, an infill extension is proposed to the same depth as the outrigger, which provides a double height space to the living area below. The lower ground and the upper ground floor extension will be enclosed with green roofs and non-openable roof lights to the upper green level. Both the lower and the upper extension are fully glazed with featured panels of glazed brickwork to the lower ground extension. The glazing is divided into vertically proportioned panels, which gives the infill extension at the upper level a similar appearance to the scheme built at number 72. The lower and upper ground level glazing have the same vertically proportioned treatments to give the extension a cohesive appearance. We have carefully considered the design proposal to minimize its impact on the neighboring properties and the conservation area. The proposed rear extension is modest in scale, so that much of the existing building with its characteristic outrigger and window remains visible. The proposed glazing to the extension is in keeping with the neighbouring development and provides a lighter appearance alongside with the predominantly solid brick utilitarian appearance at the rear elevation. The proposal also has minimal impact on the amenity of the adjoining properties, and due to the extension not projecting beyond the existing rear extension and outrigger. These views are closely supported by the planning officer in their response to the neighbours' reasons for objections, as covered in the officer's report. The aim of the proposal is to improve the quality of the space both internally and externally. The applicant is also very aware of the environmental issue challenges, particularly the densely populated areas such as Hornsey Street. Accordingly, sustainable drainage features such as complying with planning policies such as green roofs have been incorporated to reduce the water runoff into the existing drainage system. Finally, the proposal does not change the character of the building and preserves its significance and setting within the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to either party? Roberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly to the applicant. I mean, the thing that stands out to me most is the design.
Yep.
Obviously, you mentioned it's a conservation area.
Yep.
And I appreciate there are some extensions there with glass, but you look along that row of that terrace of houses, and the design of most is still pretty traditional, pretty small windows and not much glass.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is that the design is so out of keeping with the rest of that terrace. That would be my reluctance to support this.
Could I respond to that, sorry? Yep. I mean, there's a property just around the corner on the front, which has been built completely modern. And that's on the front elevation. And traditionally, with a listed building or anything that's within conservation area, it's good to actually have a separation between what's been built new and what's old. So the actual juxtaposition of material and contrast is a sympathetic way of actually dealing with that, especially on the rear where it's not facing the street. So.
This question is to the applicant,
yep.
Or the agent rather. Just wanted to know if there was the sunlight has been mentioned by the resident objector. Can you elaborate a bit with us? Any development that impacts the way of life or the standard of living for neighbours?
Yep.
Well, every decision we have to make, that we have to take those issues into consideration. So can you tell us a bit more how you navigated this issue about the sunlight, especially in the winter time?
Yeah. So with regards to sunlight, daylight, generally, I mean, if you look at the planning, from planning point of view, extensions are regarded as acceptable if we can comply with the 45-degree line, drawn from the centre line of the habitable room that has been impacted. In this situation, there will be no issue with that. So, and I think that's how the officer has also assessed the application in their comments towards that. So, you could refer to the officer on that.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Wilhouse, can you tell us a bit more about the issue you've mentioned, especially in your speech, about the sunlight and specifically on the winter months?
Yes. Now, just to be clear, the issue we have isn't in relation to light accessing the house. This is solely about access to light to the garden, which at the moment, I mean, the garden, it's not really shown by the photos, although you did see some rather big trees around the area. There's very little access of light, and in particular sunlight, to the garden. And there are high walls and there are high trees around. So any effect created by increasing the height of the division between us and number 70 is going to have a significant impact on access of light. And as you mentioned, winter, I mean, in the winter, this is an increase of 25% on the light barrier between the two properties, and in the winter that is going to cause a very significant decrease in the amount of sunlight. There may in fact be no sunlight accessing the garden in the winter months. I've not obviously been able to check that. And we're very concerned that there appears to have been no assessment, technical or otherwise, on the effect of this issue on us as neighbours.
Hargreaves was going to ask the same question. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, both of you. If you can shut the microphone. So, what do we think about questions to officers? I'd like to go first, actually. I think daylight and sunlight, we normally think about its effect on rooms. It doesn't really apply to gardens, does it, or courtyard spaces. I suppose the argument would have to be framed, if we were minded to go there, that there was a sense of enclosure. Is it possible to have a sense of enclosure of a small garden? How might that work if as I say, if we wish to go there?
I think you can consider the impact on light and sense of enclosure to a garden, but I think the critical point here is that the new extension is exactly the same depth as the existing one, so 1.695 from the main rear wall. The only difference is the additional height, and that's best seen, rather than get it up in the drawings, within your plan pack. If you have a look at the existing rear elevation and the proposed rear elevation, you can see the boundary wall shown, so that remains unchanged, and the additional height of, I mean, I'm guessing now about 200 mil. So for us, I appreciate that this is an east-facing property, but given the existing closet wing, the existing extension, the boundary walls, and how we don't see that to be a significant increase in height. That's why we conclude there's no impact, no harmful impact.
Right. So the argument would be that we are, and I'm thinking here of the importance of consistency in decision making and planning. We're saying that the extra height is such that it couldn't justify a refusal. That's essentially what the officers are saying.
Yes, I wouldn't. I don't see how we could argue that what is a minor in planning terms increase would be cause any kind of demonstrable loss of light or sense of enclosure.
Just to pursue that, and the problem here is the enclosed space you're in and the very small gardens, and where maybe it's not a completely significant height, but it is quite a height, and these are very small gardens, and the whole issue of enclosure is quite important here. If it was a bigger space, I could accept your point.
I think it might also be helpful. There's a brilliant photo right at the end of the pack that the objectors have provided, where you can see that existing extension, how it has the same depth, and the additional height that would rise above it. You can see again the position in relation to the sill. So there would be a change in circumstance, but in policy terms, when we're assessing a planning application and you're looking for whether it complies, that change to us, unfortunately, wouldn't create that harm that would be needed to refuse planning permission when we have a presumption in favour.
Well, thank you for that. So we need to make a decision. What do people think about this? I'm inclined to think the officers are probably right. I'm thinking of, as I say, this point about the importance of consistency in decision making, and we have to have regard to things which are reasonable grounds for a refusal. But what do people think? Let's go down the table again. Or who would like to go first? Who'd like to? Kazim.
I understand the point the officers mentioned, Mr. Chairman, but however, I would still think, because of the size of the garden and any change to it will still impact the living condition of the neighbor. So I will still say this kind of sense of inclusion and any sense of light will impact the living condition of the neighbor. So I think I'll stick to that point.
Okay, Roberto.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Councillor Ali. I think given that the size of the garden is so small, I understand officers' points, but I do think that is a valid counter-argument. And to be blunt, I'm still slightly hung up on the design and so much glass and out of keeping. I really don't think that's appropriate for the area.
I also have concerns about the design, and yeah, I think it's a shame. I'm not necessarily averse to anything a little bit different, and I can see that the neighbouring building has glass as well at the back, but this design sort of really heightens that there's just a lot of glass. I just can't see how it's it seems sort of imbalanced. So I can't see how it's in keeping with the conservation area.
Mr. Chairman, I concur with the comments made by my colleagues.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I think I've got a fairly good idea of where we're going to go. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those those in favour? Those against? Okay, so the recommendation is not adopted. Now, I think from the discussion that my colleagues had, if I can turn back to the officers, I think it seemed to me that the sense of enclosure, to my mind, is about context. And I think that seems to be a point that a clear majority of my colleagues think. I think it feels strongly about. For a second reason to refuse, I think again this is quite marginal, but there is a lot of glass in the proposal. I know, fortunately, Mr. Tran, of course, is an architect, but I know architects like putting forward lots of glass, particularly in when it comes to remodelling of rear extensions, and they're often not popular with neighbours, and they sometimes aren't popular with committees either. But I think in design terms, do I get the sense, colleagues, that you would like that as a reason as well? You're prepared to go along with that? Yeah. Okay. So is that, Fiona, is that?
Yeah, so 2 reasons for refusal. The proposed lower ground floor extension, by reason of its increase in height in relation to the boundary wall, would cause a harmful loss of light and increased sense of enclosure to the reared garden area of 72. And then the proposed lower ground floor extension, by reason of its modern design and expansive glazing, would fail to preserve and enhance. And we'll finish that reason off.
Okay, no, I think that sounds very much putting our the committee's views into the appropriate language. Now, this resolution to refuse must be proposed by somebody. Kasim would like to propose. Who would like to second that? Sonny will second. Can I see those in favour of the resolution to refuse for those 2 reasons that we have seen? Anyone against? I will abstain on that. So the resolution to refuse is agreed. Thank you very much. So if we now return to the South Pack, please, and consider the application at, in fact, there are 2 applications at Orpen House. So, Emma, that's back to you, isn't it? In
Yes.
the South Pack.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the next 2 items 12 and 11, both relate to Orpen House. Members' attention should be drawn to the addendum pack for this item 11. As officers have added an additional condition 14 relating to black painted railings, which was referred to in the report, but we've just included that condition there. Item 11 as stated, this is an application for the extension of the existing block to create an additional 2 stories. The development would provide 4 additional units consisting of 2 2-beds and 2 1-bed flats. The development proposals would also include solar panels and rainwater harvesting to the roof, as well as the renovation of the garden and construction of bike and bin store and planting. The development also includes an extension to the rear to provide a lift. The plans are in the packs for members, but generally the proposed extensions are considered to be sympathetically designed. The 4th floor extension would replicate the floors below, while the mansard roof has been traditionally designed with a valley setback at the front and rear of the property to reduce prominence, as well as establishing its appearance as a roof rather than a 5th floor. The resultant scheme would maintain its neutral impact on the conservation area. The applicant had explored various options in an attempt to make visual improvements, and it's considered that this scheme complies with CD1, CD2 and CD4. The applicant is proposing to provide a total of 10 cycle spaces across both applications, which complies with the Transport and Streets SPD and therefore policy TR6. The proposals would provide additional homes in the borough, contributing to housing stock in the Royal Borough, which is supported in planning policy. So overall, the new homes are welcomed by officers, and the proposed units would be of an acceptable quality. The proposals would continue to preserve the character and appearance and significance of the building and the wider conservation area. The proposals would ensure good living conditions to both future occupiers and neighbouring occupiers. Overall, and subject to the submission of a final suitable CTMP and the completion of a legal agreement to secure the new homes as permit-free, the proposals would have an acceptable impact on the highway network. Given this, the application is recommended for approval subject to the appended conditions and legal agreement. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Very good. Now, are there any questions relating to either application, or are we content? Roberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, in terms of biodiversity, has there been any consideration to adding swift boxes to the mansard?
There hasn't been any consideration to have swift boxes as part of the proposal.
Can we add them? Can we add swift boxes?
Is reasonable, which is one of the tests for conditions. I mean, there isn't a particular policy to hang it on. We've got the biodiversity. It is exempt from biodiversity. And again, that's not to say you can't ask, but it could be challenged, but it's up to members.
What boxes? Swift.
The answer to that is surely yes.
Sorry, what was that?
So we can add an informative. This would presumably be to the first application, which relates to the roof works, about swift boxes. Are we happy with that? So that would be, it would be an additional informative. Okay. Right. Are there any other questions? No. Okay. So we need to obviously make a formal decision about the applications in turn. So if we can take the first application, so this is the one ending 06233. The recommendation is to grant with our new informative added. Can I see those in favour of the proposal? With the so that's agreed. And the second application, which relates to the basement, the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour of that, please? So that recommendation is agreed as well. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can we now go back to the North Pack? And that's Fiona Ray again for Gazelle House.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application before you is for extensions and alterations at the back of Gazelle Lodge. And this application has seen significant revisions since a recent refusal of planning permission. Officers are satisfied this proposal now fully complies with the local plan and are recommending approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No, it would appear that the reasons for refusal essentially have been addressed satisfactorily, is essentially what they're saying. Well, in that case, the recommendation is that we grant planning permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Thank you. If we can stay in the North Pack, and now I think 171 Portobello Road, I think this is the the pub which is not in use, I think. Is that right? Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So 171 Portobello Road, they have sought to replace a roof light on the back of the flat roof of their extension. The works have already commenced on site, and officers have no concerns in relation to the local plan and deem it compliant, recommending approval. Thank you.
Okay. There's been some discussion. People have said this has already been installed, but I noticed there appear to be a sort of blind system so that to prevent light spillage. Have I understood that right?
That's correct. So they are proposing, I think, noting other recent decisions made by the committee. So they are proposing internal blinds and other things on the roof light to minimise any light spill in the evening. Those would be difficult for us to actually control because they don't require permission in their own right. But what we have done is put on a condition relating to the roof light being fixed shut. And also the plans themselves show those blinds and show, what they're proposing. But it has been installed already.
Any questions? No. Okay. Well, the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Thank you. Turn to the South Pack, and first of all we have 10 St Catherine's Mews.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 15 relates to 10 St Catherine's Mews. Members' attention should be drawn to the addendum pack. Planning permission is sought for the change of use to convert a 3-bedroom dwelling to office and residential use above. The application site is in the Chelsea Conservation Area. The proposal involves a change of use, creating a small office space of approximately 66 square metres while retaining the residential use above with no net loss in the number of dwellings. The proposed dwelling on the upper floors would be dual aspect, have access to external amenity space and would be incorporated with the office space all in one use. The proposed dwelling would still be of a sufficiently high standard in terms of the quality of accommodation. No external changes are proposed. The proposed development would not have a material impact on public or private views and would continue to preserve the character and appearance of the host property, the wider group and the conservation area. The proposal would not have a detrimental impact on living conditions of neighbouring properties, and the level of cycle parking proposed complies with the requirements of the local plan. Therefore, the proposed change of use to create a live-work unit complies with the relevant policies, and the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions about this? Yeah, Roberta.
Just a very quick comment. Am I looking at the papers correctly that this is turning the unit from a 3-bedroom house into a 2-bedroom flat? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the part of the ground floor and the first floor would be proposed as office space with a kitchen at first floor as well. And then the second and third floor would be occupied by a 2-bedroom flat. So no net loss in dwellings, just the residential elements move into the second and third floor.
But a loss of a single-family home?
Correct, but no net loss in a residential unit.
Yes, it's a curious application in a way. When we think even this evening we were busy discussing proposals to try and extend properties, to extend residential floor space, and here's somebody who actually has decided they want to give up residential floor space in order to have an office within their home, more explicitly have an office within their home. It's an oddity, but I think it probably, as the officer's report sets out, it probably is acceptable. I can't imagine there are many people who wish to do this, but I think it probably is acceptable.
mean, I guess patterns of work are changing, aren't they? And people are going to offices. The only comment I would just have, and it's a comment rather than anything, on objection 2 about a change of the office would increase the number of people coming and going from it. And yet the response is it's unlikely to result in additional disturbance to the neighbouring occupiers. I don't know how we assess that. I mean, we're turning it into an office, a small office, but there is office for 4 or 5 people there. It's bound to increase the number of people coming and going.
Yeah, I mean, I think given the very small scale size and nature of the use, I should think the intensification would be limited.
Okay. Yes, as I said, unusual application, but I think probably on balance acceptable. The recommendation here is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Those against? Okay, so that's granted by 4 votes to 1. Thank you. So we stay in the South Pack to consider the first Finborough Road, so number 65 of Finborough Road, please. Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 16 is in relation to 65 Finborough Road. Planning permission is sought for refurbishment works, including like-for-like replacement of existing windows with double-glazed aluminium units, as well as external and internal communal decoration refurbishment. The site is located in the Boltons Conservation Area. The proposed replacement of the existing single-glazed timber frame windows to the front elevation with double-glazed metal-framed aluminium windows which closely resemble the existing windows would be appropriate in design, form and scale. These are considered to be acceptable, and the proposals would preserve the character and appearance of the area and the aims of the relevant policies. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Any questions about this? No. In that case, the application is recommended for approval. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. If we can now move on to 140 Finborough Road.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 17 relates to 140 Finborough Road. Members' attention should be drawn to the addendum pack where an additional condition has been proposed for windows to be painted white. This is a planning application for refurbishment works, which includes like-for-like replacement of existing aluminium frame windows that closely match the original style and character of the building. Also proposed as a replacement of the front and rear doors, and they will be of similar design. The proposed works, again, would be like-for-like replacements of the existing windows and a refresh of external and internal decorations. Given the nature of the works, they would preserve the character and appearance and significance of the Boltons Conservation Area. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Any questions at all? No. In that case, I think we can move to a vote. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? That is agreed.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 18 relates to 437 to 449 Fulham Road. Planning permission is sought for the like-for-like replacement of existing UPVC double-glazed windows, maintaining existing appearance and operation. The proposal also includes replacement of flat roof sections and redecoration of the communal areas. This property is located in the Sloane Stanley Conservation Area. The replacement windows will be fitted into the existing openings. With no change to the exterior appearance of the building, there would be no material impact on neighbour amenity and no new sight lines created. Given the nature of the works, they would preserve the character and appearance of the building and the conservation area, and it would ensure good living conditions, continue for occupants and neighbouring occupants. The application is therefore recommended to you for approval. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? No. In that case, the recommendation is to grant with the conditions attached. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. I think that concludes our business for the evening. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you.